on the video to ensure you don't miss any chilling details. Let's start.
Let me tell you a story that happened to me about 15 years ago. At the time, I lived in the high desert of Los Angeles County. I was in college all day and had two jobs. One of those jobs was night security for a church that also had a school. The place was quite large with several buildings, playgrounds, and parking lots. There were two main entrances, one on the west side and one on the north side. My job was to keep an eye on everything to make sure it was secure at night. At night, we would lock the gate on the north side and station a guard in a car nearby to keep anyone from trying to get in. On the north side, there were some old trailers that the church had bought and converted into classrooms. These trailers were old and always in need of repair. But there was one in particular that was the most difficult. It made strange noises, the lights kept flickering, and the door would never stay locked. Every time I stood at the back entrance, I felt like someone was watching me. It was such a strong feeling that it gave me goosebumps and my hair stood on end. I knew something was there and it didn't feel like I was welcome. And it wasn't just me who felt this. Most of the staff felt it too. So we started taking it more seriously. Whenever a new guard started working, we would put him in the back entrance the first night without saying anything. After a few hours, we would go by to check on him. He was usually nervous or had moved his car so it wasn't facing the building. Part of our job was to make sure all the doors were locked. If they weren't, we had to go in and check to make sure everything was okay. But this particular building was always strange. The lights would come on or flicker in the middle of the night, and the chairs and tables seemed to move by themselves. One night, I locked the building, but when I went back to check, the door was open. I knew I had to go in and see what was going on. The place was creepy, especially at night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I was so scared and felt like whatever it was angry. I called another guard and we went in together, checking every corner and closet. We didn't find anything out of place. But as we were walking back to the front door, we heard a loud noise, like someone had taken a footstep. We froze, looking around, but saw nothing. The sound was scary, especially after everything that had already happened. Then we heard a strange sound, like a fast wind moving across the ceiling of the room. When the sound got right above us, it suddenly stopped and everything went silent. It wasn't the air conditioning because it was off. We ran out of there as fast as we could. I'm not saying it was a ghost or a spirit, but there was something about that building that was really scary. Let me tell you a story that happened when I was 21. At the time, I lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with my 15-year-old sister and our mother. It wasn't the prettiest place in the world. The paint on the walls was peeling and some of the neighbors were quite noisy. But it was what we had and we did our best to make it feel at home. The apartment was in the same town where I grew up, so I knew the area well. One thing that made me feel safer was seeing security guards walking around the complex, especially at night. However, our building didn't have a laundry room, so I had to walk to another building to do our laundry. I usually did this very late at night when things were quieter. Every time I went to do laundry, I had to carry a heavy basket down 5 flights of stairs. Then I would walk to the other building and go down to the basement where the laundry room was. It was a little scary walking in the dark, but knowing that the security guards were nearby made me feel better. One day, I noticed that there was a new security guard patrolling the place. He was a big man about 6 feet 3 inches tall and very muscular. He looked like a version of Mr. Clean, with a shaved head and a serious look in his eyes. He didn't talk to anyone and gave off a kind of creepy vibe, but I figured that was part of his job. My friend also lived in this complex, but in a building behind mine with a playground and a tennis court between us. One night around 10 o'clock, she called me very scared. She had gone to do laundry and said that the new security guard was following her. He followed her to the laundry room even though he had no reason to be there. She yelled at him and threatened to tell management if he didn't leave. He just looked at her and left without saying anything. That worried us both. A few weeks later, I came home from work around 9:30 at night and noticed that everything was dark. The power had gone out and the entire complex had no lights. It was so dark that I could barely see my surroundings. I was afraid to get out of the car because I had some bags with me and I didn't want to be surprised in the dark. I decided to call my mother to see if she could come down and accompany me to the apartment, but she didn't answer. I thought about calling my sister, but I knew she probably wouldn't answer either. After a few minutes, I gathered my courage and started to gather my things to get out of the car. At that moment, the power came back on and the lights came on. I felt a huge relief, but it didn't last long. When I looked up at my building, I saw the same strange security guard standing in the hallway on our floor, staring at the door to our apartment. He stood there for a few seconds, tilting his head as if he was trying to hear something through the door. Then he slowly turned around and went downstairs. I was very scared and immediately called my mother again. This time, she answered and I told her everything I had seen. She quickly came down to find me, and as soon as we got home, she called the building management to report what had happened. After that incident, we never saw that security guard there again. We heard that other residents had also had strange experiences with him. This made us think about how important it is to always be vigilant, even in places that should be safe. Some people may use their jobs, such as security or maintenance, to get close to others with bad intentions. Therefore, we should always trust our instincts and report any suspicious behavior to keep ourselves and our families safe. When I was a child, I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. It was a huge, old mansion that looked like one of those houses in horror movies. It was in the middle of the countryside, surrounded by thick trees and high fences. At the entrance, just beyond the gates, there was a small one-room shack that we called the lodge. The house used to be very isolated, but over time, other buildings were built nearby and more people moved into the area. This ended up attracting teenagers and young people who found the old, scary house very interesting. But because of this, we started having problems with break-ins and vandalism. I remember one day when I screamed really loud because I saw a man in a sweatshirt hiding behind a tree while I was playing. After several break-ins at the cabin, which was an easy target because it was on the edge of the property, we realized that we needed to do something. The cabin was small, empty, and no one had lived there for years, so it became the perfect place for troublemakers. To protect the house, we hired a security company to send a guard at night. He would patrol the area around the cottage to make sure no one was trying to break in or cause trouble. This made us feel safer, knowing that someone was watching over the place. The next morning, my uncle went to check on the guard, but he was simply not there, even though his shift hadn't ended. My uncle called the security company, quite upset, and they apologized, promising to send another guard the next night. But the same thing happened again and again the night after. When my uncle complained to the company again, they said they had done everything they could. They had even fired the last guard for abandoning his post, and now they couldn't send anyone else. Feeling frustrated, my uncle got the guard's number and arranged to meet with him. When they met, the guard explained what had happened. He was very nervous about his job because his colleagues had said negative things and no one wanted to be in that position. He was an experienced guard and had never walked off duty before, so this was quite strange for him too. The guard said that on the night in question, everything was normal until about 2 a.m. Suddenly, he heard a loud bang coming from inside the cabin, which was strange because the place was all boarded up and there was only one entrance, which he was guarding. He slowly entered through the front door and stopped to listen for more noises, but it was silent. He looked around the house, which was practically empty with no furniture, and then left. 5 minutes later, he heard the bang again, this time clearly coming from upstairs. He quickly climbed the stairs and entered a room in the middle of the hallway. There, in the center of the room, was an armchair with its back to him. Sitting in the chair, he saw a dark, shadowy shape that looked like a shadow. Even in the dim light of the moon, he could see it clearly. He froze in fear. The shadow began to move as if it were getting up. She was about 2 meters away from him and he heard the crash again, but the shadow did not move. It seemed as if the noise was coming from the shadow itself, not from any movement. The guard described how terrified he was. He could not move and the room felt intensely cold, even though it was a warm night outside. A sense of danger took hold of him and his instincts told him to run. Overcome with fear, he turned and ran out of the house without looking back, until he reached his car. There he called his boss and told him that he refused to go back, even if he was fired. Nothing in the world would make him go back there. The terrifying feeling he had felt made him believe that this thing was pure evil. My uncle believed his story without hesitation. The guard had no reason to lie, and the sweat on his face as he told the story showed how scared he was. I have many stories about that house, especially the main mansion. Everyone who lived there has had their own strange experiences. We ended up getting dogs to keep the vandals away, but who knows? Maybe people stopped going there because they heard about what was really there, or maybe they were just too scared to go back. I am a 24-year-old woman who moved from Orlando to my family's farm in the middle of nowhere. I had never had any problems in Orlando, but after my divorce, I had to move there with my mother. It was just me and my 2 young children. The house was large with 8 bedrooms and a guest suite, but it was pretty run down with peeling paint, old floors and a few broken windows. When we moved in, we only cleaned 2 bedrooms and spent about 9 months working on fixing up the rest of the house. That was a lot of work with lots of cleaning, painting and repairs. The man who lived across the street, who we'll call Henry, was very helpful from the beginning. He would come by almost every day while he was feeding his animals and would offer to help with whatever I needed, like fixing things, moving furniture, or even babysitting for a while. During those 9 months, I never felt like Henry had any bad intentions. The farmhouse was shaped like a U, and the bedroom I chose had windows that looked out onto the patio area, which was in the middle of the house. When I moved in, Henry put up a fence around that area so my kids could play safely. The farmhouse was right in the middle of the property, away from the road, so I never worried about anyone spying on us. My bedroom windows looked out onto a fenced-in area in the center of the house, and since I felt safe, I didn't even put curtains on them. One day my son was playing under the garage when Henry, the neighbor, drove up in his truck. He was going to check on my car. Before Henry arrived, my oldest son said to me, "Mom, I saw Henry outside my window last night." Later I talked to my son again to find out more. He told me that he had seen Henry standing outside his bedroom window. This made me start to wonder if Henry was really as friendly as I had imagined. I asked my son if he had seen Henry through the kitchen window, which overlooks the horse pasture. Henry used to stop by to feed the horses every morning and night, so I thought my son had just seen him doing that and I didn't worry too much. But looking back, other things started to seem strange. I guess I wanted to believe that Henry was a good person, so I ignored a lot of things. One day after school, I found my favorite candy in the refrigerator. My mom said she remembered me telling Henry that it was my favorite. Someone had also been sending me flowers every Friday for a few months. I thought they were from my ex-husband or maybe my boyfriend at the time, but neither of them admitted to sending them. My boyfriend joked that it might be Henry. A few weeks later, I was mowing the long grass in the yard. When I got to my bedroom window, I felt a chill. I noticed that cinder blocks had been placed outside my bedroom and bathroom windows. At that moment, I knew something was wrong and that everyone was right about Henry. I called my friend Josh to come take a look. After checking it out, he suggested setting up a deer camera and placed it in a tree outside my window. That same afternoon, when I got home with the boys, I saw Henry standing behind me. He said, "Hey, I didn't mean to scare you. I heard your mom is out of town." Knowing that he already knew about it from Facebook, I said yes. He told me to call him if I needed anything. This made me start to wonder if Henry was really as friendly as I had imagined. I asked my son if he had seen Henry through the kitchen window, which overlooks the horse pasture. Henry used to stop by to feed the horses every morning and night, so I thought my son had just seen him doing that and I didn't worry too much. But looking back, other things started to seem strange. I guess I wanted to believe that Henry was a good person, so I ignored a lot of things. One day after school, I found my favorite candy in the refrigerator. My mom said she remembered telling me Henry that it was my favorite. Someone had also been sending me flowers every Friday for a few months.